Watch this video with our virtual reality glasses for smartphone. virtualvizor.com.
So let me introduce our speakers, and they'll each tell you a little about themselves. First is Björling, who's Global Director of VR at MediaMonks. So, Oleg, why don't you start by telling everyone a little bit about your company and how you are using VR in your business today?
Sure. So we're a digital production company servicing primarily ad agencies and major brands, which means we do campaign and advertising-based content primarily. And if you're a production company within digital, VR is obviously the new shiny thing. So we're betting pretty big on that. And now we are seeing this major shift within VR from ad and marketing into home entertainment now that all the major headsets are out, and we're heading into the first VR Christmas, which is why it kind of makes sense to be at a place like this. We're about 550 something people, 10 offices around the world, so it's a pretty large production shop, but we do more than VR. However, the number of people within the company that are working on VR projects is ticking up every day. We're at about 15% of the company right now is working on VR.
And the types of projects that you're working
Oh
on?
yeah, and we do anything in the medium, so game engine based, both Unreal and Unity and other. Video, we build our own camera systems. We do pure audio design for VR. We build post-production tools even when they don't exist. So it's a pretty broad range of stuff. We're trying to tackle the medium on all fronts for now. We'll see how long we sustain that.
And how do you get your clients today? Are these clients that you've already worked with and you're introducing them to the systems for the first time? Or?
Yeah, so ad agencies, when they have, how that world works is there's an RFP, a request for price, so they send out a briefing about this is a project for this client that we want to do. They send it to some production shops that they think could be a good fit for that particular production, and you reply with your own sort of pitch, or you try to reply with this is how we would solve it, this is what it would cost, this is our creative input on this, and then you hope to get awarded the project. And in that ecosystem, you need to be able to do a lot of different things. You can't be a one-trick pony, which is why we're betting pretty big on it, because not every project is going to be a 360 video or a Unity project or an Unreal project. There's going to be this wide variety of different types of productions. So we're also trying to stay at the forefront of what are the possibilities within this, which means what are the cameras, what are the game engines, what are the audio systems for this, what are the other modes of interaction, what is the philosophy around the medium, because this is not just technical. The technical is only there in the service of the experience. So what is at the forefront of user interaction in this medium? How do you deal with, how do you convey information in this medium and not just experiences or emotional impact and things like that? So it's a very broad thing, and we try to be a one-stop shop for those clients that want premium content, that understand that quality takes a bit of time and effort. That's where we're trying to position ourselves. So we're not competing with, three dudes running a startup from a garage. That we can't beat them on price, but we can hopefully beat them on quality.
We also have Runa Inverson, who's VR supervisor at Digital Domain. So in this case, we have a traditional visual effects house that now is working in virtual reality. Tell us a little bit about the model of your company.
Sure. So originally we stemmed from being a for-service visual effects provider and creating high-end visual effects for features and commercials. And recently we have started going into the VR world by coming up with our own camera systems as well. And very much what you've gone through, we've been doing as well as a for-service client services company. And we are slowly doing that. We also develop our own content. We're starting to develop our own content with our content studio group, and they've been putting out a bunch of stuff. So over the last week at VR on the Lot, we did the motion simulator that was a big hit that Will.i.am was in. And so we're doing a lot more of these types of kind of activations for clients, whether they be at San Diego Comic-Con or at pop-ups for brands, Nike and the such, and Undefeated. And so we're going down that road and leveraging our client base off of our ad agency contacts as well as our feature film and commercial contacts. So.
Next we have Spencer Hunt, who's Vice President of Game and Interactive Entertainment at Skydance Productions. And you also now have virtual reality as part of your plan. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Skydance was started 6 years ago now as a film financing and production company. 2 years ago, it added television, and this past spring, we added interactive. With interactive, we decided, really to go right for virtual reality. We think it fits in line with the notion of world building. Skydance has worked on projects like Mission Impossible, and we financed Terminator, and are going to continue doing, large productions like that are kind of, some are blockbuster caliber. When we think about virtual reality, we think about getting into it with exactly that same passion. When we're building VR, we're not just going to be building, short experiences. We're really looking at 2 to 3 hour experiences that will be played as games. It's not going to be 360 video. It's very hard to make the kind of movies that we're making in 360 video, but when it comes to games, we can actually put people in a world that is original and created just for VR. And by original, I mean a lot of our virtual reality projects, and especially our first one, has nothing to do with any movie or film, television that we're working on at all. It's a completely original story. So we've acquired a company that has 60 game developers, and they're in Marina del Rey, and being right down the street from Skydance, it's really allowing us to do this rich collaboration between our storytelling expertise and their technical and creative interaction skills. So all of our projects are, Unreal 4 engine, and they'll be based, on headsets that have hand controllers. We're very much a firm believer that virtual reality is really best experienced when you have hands and agency inside of the world. So our first projects come out in the spring, but I can't talk in great detail about it, but I think there's some questions that we'll get to.
Okay. And for the original content, is it sponsored, or is Skydance funding the projects? Or?
Now, much like we're doing with film and television, we're completely funding this. In the case of film and television, we work with distribution partners, so they'll come in and do partial financing. In the case of virtual reality, we're actually winding up a publishing team, so we'll be releasing a slate of titles each year that are going to be fully financed by Skydance.
Okay. And we have Dario Raciti, who is director at Zero Code O&D. Tell us about your business in virtual reality.
Yeah, so OMD is it's a media agency, it's part of Omnicom Media Group. We have a lot of clients, anything from Pepsi to McDonald's, all the big brands. Zero Code, my team is specialized. We started with gaming, and now 2.5 years ago we moved to gaming and virtual reality. And so my team, kind of like lives in the world of gaming and virtual reality. In other words, how do we get a brand like Pepsi or a Nissan to be involved with one of those worlds, whether creating original content or be part of content like you are producing, for example, with product placement and so on. We don't send out RFPs, and I've mentioned that agencies, he gets RFPs from them. We actually come up with the concept internally, we present to the client, and once we sell it, then we decide who is the right developer to produce that piece of content, based on their skills, based on what we know from previous work that they've done. So somebody who's good for 360 video may get a project from us versus somebody who we have a need for gaming interaction within the experience, then we go to somebody else.
Yeah. And seated next to me is Biermann, who is the founder of the Heavies Project, who has a very unique use of virtual reality. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, I think I'm the black sheep here. We build primarily augmented reality experiences, and I'm a very reluctant business person. I'm really an academic and a digital artist who sort of drug into the business world. My first project was really augmenting guerrilla-style movie posters. One in particular was back when the Disney Pirates of the Caribbean augmenting Jeffrey Rush's face and converting it to Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. That got a short blurb in Wired magazine, and it kind of took off from there. We started augmenting all the billboards in Times Square with curated digital street art. That kind of took off virally. And we've been doing sort of actually, marketing campaigns. But ironically, marketers and advertisers kept approaching us. And we worked with some enterprise companies on a number of interesting projects, all unbranded. So we do a lot of public space, interactive, augmented reality art projects for events like South by Southwest and other international events. But our relationship with this technology has always been sort of an ideological one. And we work with enterprise companies in a sort of very unique way, I think, and carved out a sort of a niche in this world where we see this technology as sort of a democratized, interactive public space technology. So we have sort of a services angle, we have a public art angle, and we're working on a platform that allows users who don't have a coding background to put content, artistic content, on their own into public spaces and sort of circumvent private property boundaries. That's about as much as I can say about that particular project at this point. And so that's, I think, our AR angle.
And I would imagine in a lot of cases this is the first time that people you're working with are experiencing AR since it's still very new.
Yeah, it still has a sort of a magical feel to it, and I hope that lasts as long as possible. But our interest is really vested into public urban spaces.
So let's talk a little bit about where we are right now with the technology and how that fits into all of what we're talking about. So we have Touch coming out in November. We have the Sony PlayStation Move out last week. How important to each of you is interactivity to forwarding your business and the business? Spencer, you might want to start with that. I know it's important to you.
I mean, it's for us, getting somebody inside of a world means touching the world. And as bullish as we are on it, I would say that you have to approach it with some caution. Like, a lot of people are not going to have the Oculus Touch controllers. A lot of people are only going to have one PlayStation Move controller. A lot of people aren't going to have Move controllers at all. They're just going to have a PlayStation gamepad. So you have to support a variety of interaction types, or if you're mobile, you're doing games. So we kind of recognize all of that, but our primary target for our products is really going after people who are so invested in virtual reality that they're going to have the controllers. It's a little bit of a gamble, but we think that, while maybe the next year is going to be, kind of a rise in both headsets and controllers, we think that over time that level of immersion is going to be expected, and we're going to kind of stage ourselves to be right on the front of that.
What about the rest of you? How important is interactivity?
Well, I can add some spice maybe by going against Spencer slightly here.
Oh, I know we're crazy.
Yeah, so I think we've done interactive things as well. We've done stuff with controllers, but most of what we've done is 360 video. And 360 video has several sort of drawbacks from absolute immersion at this point. And I think controllers isn't really the biggest one. It is certainly, you don't see your hands, so you can't interact with the world in a video. But a much bigger concern for immersion in VR is positional head tracking, or 6 degrees of freedom, because currently you're looking around from where the camera was, but you can't move your head. I'm not going to have that effect yet on most platforms. And that is sort of a concern, that if you shift your weight slightly, even if it's a seated experience, even if I do that, my vision doesn't change correspondingly, and it undermines the potential for presence or immersion. But there's even more subtle cues, such that if I look down, if I turn my head down, my eyeballs actually travel vertically, and my whole life that has resulted in perspective shifting accordingly. In VR, it doesn't. So it feels like the world is sort of gliding or stretching weirdly if I do that type of movement with stuff close to me in a 360 video. just getting away from those, just having this amount of space for positional head tracking in a video, a very small, not necessarily light field, but a tracked space, that would make a world of difference that I think is more profound for the user experience than any sort of ability to interact with something would be. Yet, of course, there are experiences where interaction is the very purpose of what you're doing. So it is, to me, saying that touch or hand tracking is fundamental I don't think that's always necessarily true. I think positional head tracking for head movement, and because even when I turn my head, my eyeballs are also gliding on an arc, sort of, which is why you're seeing a lot of 360 cameras being of a certain size, because that size doesn't necessarily correspond to a head, but it corresponds to the trajectory your eyeballs do as you rotate your head around your neck joint, so that that movement sort of corresponds and feels natural, but you can't do that vertically. And then I think once we get there with video content, we're going to be able to unlock something that is really crucial and that a lot of people are missing with VR. It is really glorious to just be in a space. And actually, the times in your life when you've had a moment when you're just absorbing a time and space, you're really present in the moment. We've all heard the word presence to death, but when you're really present in a real moment, think back to a moment where you really just absorbed where you are and how you feel, something that's been really pivotal for you as an experience. Were you touching things? I think you maybe weren't. I think you were probably in a more serene mode. This is not disqualifying touch. I'm just saying there are experiences that can be really profound without them. So of course we want the ability. I'm not going to, trip up anyone trying to solve touch or haptics or any of that. I mean, I'll embrace it wholeheartedly. But it's not what we're chasing primarily. I think there's a lot of stuff to unlock in terms of how an experience feels and just the ability to feel present in a place you couldn't otherwise be in. And to me, that's the fundamental thing that all VR experiences do. Interacting with the environment comes slightly later on this sort of ladder. I mean, if you imagine a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for sort of levels of unique things that VR provides, the presence in a time and space you couldn't otherwise be in, that's the fundamental thing. That's the groundwork. Interacting with that environment comes later. And that presence, we still haven't done that fully well yet. There's still work to do there.
Well, and part of what you're talking about is just the distinction between very expensive headsets and what most people will experience VR for the first time, which is with mobile.
Yeah, yeah. And although mobile is sort of getting positional head tracking, Qualcomm has a prototype, Intel has a prototype, Oculus showed theirs. So it's come in a year. Maybe Daydream are left behind, but that's sort of where it's going with mobile as well.
Other thoughts on interactivity?
I think for us, for interactivity is less, I mean, we're dictated by what clients want from us. If they want interactivity, we'll build interactivity for them. But in terms of creating content and navigating with a client through their world, they can control it interactively with the controllers. And they're able to move things around at their own will and position furniture, so to speak, around their world. And that makes for a quicker turnaround while we're developing their content for them, whether it's interactive or not. So in terms of delivering content that has that interactivity, we'll do whatever you want, really. But internally, it helps you to have interactivity when you build your world. And that's how we're kind of approaching it that way. Yeah.
Can you talk more about that? That sounds awesome.
Oh, like
you actually give clients tools.
Yeah. So we have tools that allow clients to come to our studio and actually, okay, here's a Vive wand. Where do you want how big do you want your room? And they can point and say, I want it this big. I want to draw here. This is what this is the dimensions of the room, and we can build the room based on an interactive client session. And so as we develop this content, we have our own little tool set that allows clients to interactively change things and save screenshots, save models out. So then it can go back to our 3D system and 3D modelers and create it for real. Like actually create an asset that has been bought off by the client and said, oh, this is a wonderful thing. I was there when I made this. Like they had a contribution as opposed to sending pictures. They can sit in a room and move their furniture for them. It's quite an interactive, powerful experience. Whether it's an interactive experience or not, like we've done different things for big clients where it's just, I just want a room, but I want to be with you while I make it, and we can do that. And so that's where we approach our interactivity at the studio.
So is it sort of like previs for VR?
It is previs for VR to a certain degree, and it's not just for room scale stuff, right? I mean, we can put anything in the VR space. Like if we have a car client come in and they want to change the color, they can interactively change the color and see it in VR. And they can walk around their car and say, I don't like the side of this. I mean, I'm sure, you know, Ford and GM, they are all having their VR departments create cars because they're 3D models already. And so you have that asset, and to be able to do visual effects quality, high-end work in the VR space with their asset and have it move down the road the way they want, it's pretty powerful. And to move the room around their work, you know, it's quite powerful for them. So.
I think there's something I'd say about replay value as well. So when we first started doing projects in virtual reality 2.5 years ago, you know, doing a 360 video was amazing. It was just like, wow, this is incredible. And then as we continue doing projects for our clients, I remember we did one, I'm not going to name here because, you know, client sensitivities, but we did a project and we did a focus group with about 100 people. And you were actually being in the scene and you were playing a sports game, but it was shot from a fixed point of view, linear. It was mixed CG with live action. But pretty much everybody that tried that experience in that focus group actually wanted to be part of that experience. They wanted to control that action. And so I think there's room for both linear, whether it's video or not, and interactive, but if you look at what users are looking for, it's more interactivity. As soon as you put them in that headset, and now that I'm there, I want to be able to do something. I don't want to be just a ghost.
And I think there's a generation gap as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been brought up with passive entertainment, a lot of us, watching broadcast TV and things like that.
Right.
And you see like a toddler now, they walk up to the TV trying to swipe to change the channel, because that's just logical to them. So we're getting a generation that wants to interact with everything. So we're the fossils up here that should probably not have a say in this.
So there are obviously a lot of research and statistics on AR and VR at the moment, but one that I'll quote is from Strategy Analytics, which is predicting that by the end of 2016, 6% of U.S. households will have a VR headset, which is roughly 11.4 million Americans, and they're suggesting that 93% of those will be mobile phone based, such as cardboard and Samsung VR gear. With that in mind, as you create your content, are you anticipating that most of it will be sold on a platform online? Will it be available for people to try at trade shows, or how is it going to get into a user's hands?
For us, when we talk to clients about how we deliver products, there are many different avenues based on on-site activations, like at Comic-Con or any of these trade shows, as well as online, like the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world. I guess there are only 2 of them, but you know, delivering content through that, we talk to our clients and say, if you want the widest audience, go there. But at the same time, you don't get the specialized VR experience that you would at a trade show, where you can line people up and do stuff in the Vive or in a Rift. So I think as we move forward, we're always going to start to focus on more of these real-time 6 degrees of freedom experiences, but at the same time deliver content for everything else, because we can, and it's in the best interest of the agency and the client to get their stuff out there into the most eyes as possible, to sell this medium, to get people excited. And then when we put it out there into YouTube and Facebook, you can put a tagline at the end that says, show up here at Comic-Con to see it in real time, and to be able to to play with it, to interactively work with it. So, I mean, I think it's powerful. Yeah.
Spencer, you're not.
Yeah, we have the kind of the same approach. Like, if there's a place that can possibly engage with an audience, we will find our way there. I mean, especially when you're looking at how few units are going to be, you know, at-home headsets, non-mobile headsets. That's our biggest challenge right now. It's like all of the predictions were a little bit soft. You know, the manufacturing rollout was a little bit soft. It'll get there in some version over the next couple of years, but right now we believe that a large number of people will experience our products for the first time at location-based centers. You know, kind of a new version of an arcade. You know, and those are not just going to be in the US, it's going to be all around the world. So we'll absolutely focus on digital delivery. There's not going to be any boxes in our future, but it'll be, through every digital storefront you can find, and then as in many location-based centers as we can do contracts with.
And so distribution, even if we sort of dial back down to 360 video, there's a lot of obstacles because, so most video is, so it's a sphere that you're looking around inside of, but we don't have a video format that is a sphere. They're all rectangles. That's how you encode a video, the digital file. So how do you represent a sphere in a video? Well, the most common version is a rectangular projection, which is what YouTube uses, for example. That's really inefficient. So then Facebook and others have developed cube mapping of different varieties, where you are a cube instead. It's less distortion, you can get more quality out of the same bitrate, et cetera, et cetera. But then do you distribute that only on Facebook, and how do you do, like, are you getting a lot of views on YouTube, because YouTube being YouTube, are going to get a lot of eyeballs, but are you okay with getting sort of the dialed back, slightly blurry or slightly softer, not just because of the projection, but because of their bit rates and transcoding? All that decision. Then we get to audio. Well, these are all different audio platforms, so your audio mix might need to be redone straight out of the core assets from the ground up for different platforms. Because so Samsung VR, formerly called Milk VR on Gear VR, uses Fraunhofer Singo. Facebook now launched their new audio format, TV format. YouTube uses first-order ambisonics with higher-order ambisonics and object-based audio coming later, but it's not rolled out yet, so you can't build for it yet. And they're using even their version of channel ordering and normalization for ambisonics, which is different from other ambisonic solutions. And so there isn't just this build a content and just roll it out everywhere. You need to plan this from the get-go, because, so just for example, for audio, how you are going to allow the user to hear the audio content of even a 360 video might dictate not just how you mix it, but how you record it. So you should know this beforehand. And so right now, this is hard to predict, because we're moving at such a speed that's saying now, all right, in 6 months, this is going to be the established VR audio standard for linear video. I mean, I wouldn't bet money on that. This is crazy right now. So we end up just doing it over and over again for as many as we can muster or as our client can pay for, or sometimes we just do it for free because we want to do it. And that's just 360 video. So we have this problem of standardization, but it shouldn't be standardized. The standards bodies should, let this play out, because this is a boiling kettle right now. Let this simmer for a while and see what comes up on top. Because if you try to nope, this is the standard, you will obstruct evolution. So it has to be the Wild West for a while longer. And us as content providers are just going to have to bite down and just explore and try to do as many as possible in order to find what it will ultimately be the best approach. And again, this is only about 360 video. If you then go to the platform, so how do you design interaction that works with the Vive controllers, which will soon enough be a different controller as they update it. That Oculus Touch, which is only now coming out to consumers. And then you have, for Daydream, you have a single controller that can do some things, and you have PlayStation, which have their controllers with all different sort of input methods and different pros and cons in terms of how realistic emotion feels. How do you throw something with one controller? How do you do a throwing gesture and then translate that into an ultimate throwing gesture for the other controller? And suddenly you're building that little component for all the different platforms that you want to target. So right now, targeting multiple platforms is crazy.
I'm not going to trade you controller problems for audio problems. That sounds horrible.
So it's interesting from our perspective, when we come up with a concept for a client, we decide right from the beginning what we want the user experience to be like, what we want the user to get out of that experience. And based on that, we say, all right, this particular piece of content needs to live on Vive and, let's say, Rift, because these are the only two devices that can offer that level of interactivity. Now, we have to also consider, so that the two things to consider. First, what we want the user to experience, and then the budget that we have. Because every additional platform that we add to port from Vive to Rift, from Rift to PSVR, and so on, adds incremental cost. So for us, the primary thing is what we want the user to get out of this, what is the best experience. No one on the client side expects this to be a mass reach vehicle at this point. So there are trade-offs. We certainly don't recommend using one platform only, so no exclusivities yet, but at least have some flexibility of doing maybe a version that's maybe could be just a regular trailer on a mobile device, and then do the real experience on more sophisticated devices. That's mostly where we're tending to go nowadays. But again, it depends on cost and what the experience is like.
Interesting comments about standards, or your belief that we don't need them yet. But I mean, obviously, traditionally, film and TV has wanted standards. So I'm curious how the rest of you feel. Do any of you feel differently? Do you want to see more standardization at this point?
It would be nice, but I mean, we're so early in this game. I mean, everybody in this room is cutting edge on this in VR, and so you go out on the street, and nobody knows what it is yet. So I think we'll get to standards for sure. I was in I think it was the Lantro Cinema presentation at NAB, and they got the same question: is there a standard for light fields? So well, we're not even there yet. So I think we're in the same place. It's like we have to, you know, go through this Wild West before we can actually make it a standard and have a body that can actually focus on it right now. So
Yeah, the standards question is a really interesting one. I mean, I participate in IEEE industry standards working groups, and originally it was parsed out and very siloed in terms of AR and VR, and I was always a bit troubled by that. It seems like an artificial siloing of these technologies, and they're really convergent. We use a lot of the same technologies, Unity certainly. A lot of the digital assets are the same. A lot of the encoding, you know, a lot of those standards are already in place. And some of them are still shaking out. I tend to agree to let some of this play out. But I think we should be having the discussions. And I think it's important to have the discussions in the industry players in terms of the content creators themselves, and certainly the companies at the enterprise level should all be participating in those discussions. So on the one hand, I do think it's important to let it play out within, I guess, some sort of a controlled environment, if that's the way to put it. So that's, I think, where I fall on that. And it's both overwhelming and exciting at the same time. On the AR side of things, it seems to have been a little bit more fleshed out in terms of the hardware side and the platform side. The hardware obviously needs a shrinking form factor. You know, the Pokemon Go craze, obviously now I don't have to explain to everybody what the hell AR is. I just have to say, okay, you've heard of Pokemon Go, fine. Now we know what AR is. However, we never got into, at least I didn't, I never got into this game to have people walk around doing this, right? It's still a bit absurd. I'm a little disappointed that the glasses haven't been a little quicker to market, in that they still look terrible. No one's going to adopt AR truly until the glasses look like yours, or you know, the people who are sitting in this audience, they look like your glasses. They actually help you see better. The prescription, you can turn on AR, you can turn on VR. It's truly a convergent piece of hardware. That's where this is going. We'll get there. I can't predict when, and anybody who predicts when doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm just hopeful for sooner rather than later, before I, you know, my hands can't develop anymore. That's what I'm hopeful for. To have continuing, ongoing, productive conversations about technologies, and certainly the ethics behind some of these technologies.
I mean, I mean, these are kind of technical standards, but one of the things that I'm looking at from the, like, so Skydance has the interactive side, but it also has just, you know, production side. And, you know, there's an existing creative pipeline that goes from pre-visualization to building sets and renting camera equipment, and those things will all be better with virtual reality as part of the pipeline. You know, I want a standard that moves from production to production. Like, I don't want to develop an internal Skydance VR, you know, kind of previs solution. That's a really expensive thing, and it's only going to work for one production. I need something that I can hire a complete creative production staff for TV or film and put them into this, and they already know what to expect out of it. And, you know, so when it comes to standards, there's like the technical pieces, but then I think there's also workflow. Like, we've enjoyed on the traditional TV and film side the same workflow for decades and decades, and this new technology is so exciting and everybody wants to be involved with it, but until they actually can really decide in their head that investing the time to get good at it is going to be meaningful, as in it's not just going to be this production, but it's also going to help with every next production that they're working on. It's very difficult to get the creatives, you know, that are making the very, very high caliber movies, instead of just dabbling with it, because you hear about every producer in town having some kind of VR piece, but really putting it as part of their pipeline. I think some standard needs to emerge that they realize will be portable.
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, you're not just starting businesses that are doing early virtual reality or augmented reality projects, but you're developing workflows for your businesses too. What are the other pain points where you'd like to see some development?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
I'll let somebody else do that. But just to tie a bow on it. On the standards. Yes, I think to add on to that, very good point, is that we're building on these technologies that have been around. This isn't the first go around for these technologies, right? So we're building on existing standards, W3 or WC. Excuse me, W3C standards, other standards that we're already building on top of. And I mentioned the IEEE that's done amazing work already in these areas. So these are ongoing discussions that we're building on top of that we're now sitting on. So we're participatory in existing conversations, and then there's another layer of Wild West that I think we need to let play out. To the next question.
Oh. About other things that need to develop?
Yes.
Sort of?
Yes.
Well, maybe I can find a connection to what you were saying, because a lot of people coming into VR have a background in one specific field. You come in and you're a filmmaker. You come in and you're a game designer. You come in and you're just a technology enthusiast, or you've worked with machine vision, or you're coming from academia, or any of these backgrounds. However, virtual reality and augmented reality, I would say, and I agree, they will merge. Like this sort of instinctive lust to draw a line between them and define what's what, that's going to look really bad in hindsight, because this will all be the same. You'll have glasses with per pixel occlusion very soon. And so the thing that most people miss when they come in from all of these diverse backgrounds is that VR is not just another screen for a filmmaker, it's not just another peripheral for a game designer, it's a new medium entirely, and it's the most multidisciplinary medium we've had. There's more things you need to get right in order to make a VR production successful than in anything that preceded it. That sets the bar high enough already. And then it's the fact that we're not doing make-believe. You're not interpreting and translating this medium into your head. If you read a book, it plays out in the cinema of the mind. If you're watching a film, the film's not happening to you. You're imagining yourself into a rectangle. The language of film that has evolved now for 121 years has also evolved to reach out to you from its side of the room, out of the rectangle. No one goes to the bathroom in movies or says goodbye before they hang up, and cars explode way too easily. All of these are sort of narrative conventions to help convey what is happening, skipping the stuff that doesn't matter, exaggerating other things in order to convey a story. But we're not conveying a story, it's not make-believe, it's not an interpretation or translation of what's happening in a rectangle. Virtual reality, the potential of virtual reality that I think is often missed when you are a filmmaker or a game designer, you have one of these backgrounds and you're looking at this new thing in light of what you already know, is that you're coming into virtual reality and you don't realize that it's not an interpreted or translated medium. It's a direct sensory experience. That's why we all believe that there's something great about it. That's the potential of the medium, to be this direct sensory experience, that you are there. So there was another panel where I was happy to hear someone sort of shitting a little bit on the word storytelling in VR, and I agree, not story as a word, but the telling part, and I'm getting to my point in this ramble, trust me. I think what's happening with VR, the one thing that needs to be developed for VR is this understanding, this realization of what the medium is, and certainly what it isn't. Too many people go, how can we make sure they look in the right direction? Well, you could do it in a frame, you could do it not in VR, and you can control what they see. If you need to control what they see, VR is probably not for you, necessarily. So I think this realization that this can be a direct sensory experience, and the understanding of what that means, not just in the multidisciplinary medium where that sets the bar, but also it's not virtual make-believe, it is virtual reality. You're manufacturing what is supposed to function internally as a replacement for reality's sensory input for you. That raises the bar much further. And one example I usually give, you've probably all seen Truman Show, and he doesn't realize he's in a TV show. But he eventually breaks out of the pattern and steals a boat and sets off to what he thinks is the horizon. And then his boat hits the wall and he realizes that's a painted sky. Truman will never believe that sky again. And that's what you're doing in VR if you're not doing things well enough. If you're not doing it to be a direct sensory experience, if you're not doing it to be a replacement for reality itself, if you're going into VR producing content with the idea that this is still a medium that needs to be interpreted and translated by the sort of cognitive processing of the viewer, then you're never going to reach the potential of the medium. And that realization, I think, is sort of the elephant in the room that very few people are pursuing. And it's in so much content. You look at all the launch titles for PlayStation VR. None of them are trying to solve for this. None of them are trying to do anything more than, oh, it's cool, you can look around. And I think that's missing the point of the very medium they're trying to monetize. So that's sort of end of rant.
Okay, so since we're running a little bit short on time,
Sorry.
I do want to leave you a little bit of time for questions. Yes. And actually, I'm going to have to repeat your questions to try to keep it tight so I remember it. Okay.
So my question is actually about intellectual property, since it's the Wild West, and it sounds like you guys are using, Unity or Unreal Engine. I mean, there's some common basics that you're all using right now. But as we get interactive and people are feeding into this, how do you see the intellectual property rights flowing in a way that makes monetization sensible, right? Because the flip side of it is patent trolls. And any piece of code that gets in there, someone can come and say, but this little bit's ours. Or for those of us on the production side, we want to make money on how this interacts, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
The question's about intellectual property.
And intellectual property in terms of the tools used to produce it.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the things that we're seeing commercialized today were developed in the 60s or early 70s. I have a feeling that there's going to be some landmines that are going to come out. I mean, and those are, who knows, I mean, I've done a little research on patents, and there's not a ton there, but I suspect somebody's going to come up with some weird gesture thing that they're going to say, we own this gesture.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that as well. As so Digital Domain, we created a tool almost 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, called Nuke. And that was our internal compositing package that only Nuke had, only Digital Domain had. And we were able to use that to our advantage when we created visual effects for features and commercials. Now, a couple of years later, after that, we're able to monetize that internal tool set, and that gets sold to the foundry for untold amounts, right? So we see that happening now. Like, if there's time spent to create the tool set, then people will want that because it's the best it is, or it works in their environment. So I think we're going to see that IP for tools come down the line.
You made a standard.
Yeah, well, we made a tool set that now everybody uses.
Yeah.
Like every feature film, every
We use it all the time.
yeah. So everybody uses it now, and it used to be just in DD, and now it's shared to the world. And now we don't have those. We don't have it anymore because it's been sold. But at the same time, it started as something that we developed to solve a problem.
I'm just going to touch really briefly on the question again, because I think your concern is what if you monetize something and then someone says, hey, that utilized my piece of thing? And we've had that happening with web technology for a while, for example, where everyone relies on open source code libraries for JavaScript or whatever, and you build a site and then someone changes the licensing for that, and you have built a site so it auto updates to the latest version of your JS library, which is no longer under the same licensing terms, and someone comes in and tries to patent it. So that same mechanism applies in terms of auto updates. Be careful with auto updates of content. Make sure you're vetting what goes into each update that gets distributed. But the game engine, so Unreal and Unity, that's all cleared. You can use them just fine. Those structures are really clear. You would have to be more concerned with the same type of thing that have been an issue for all other mediums. Have you bought the rights for the samples you use for the audio stuff? or the 3D assets you used for something, or, it's just asset management to a large extent. So there is a little bit of the code library type stuff, but the major ones we're going to rely on, which is sort of game engines and audio engines, because that's what gets packaged into the distributable form. Whatever tools you use behind the curtain before you distribute it, no one needs to see that, and if you paid your license, you're good, but no one knows if you haven't. So in the distributable package, it's going to be the game engine, the audio engine, potentially some extra code. So for Unity, for example, there's a bunch of interesting sort of middleware or libraries to start off of that have mapped the controllers already, so you don't have to set up everything up yourself. Just make sure to read the licenses. It's sort of like web development or a lot of other software development.
Okay, yes, in the third row. Yes.
For Spencer, you mentioned crafting 2 to 3 hour VR experiences, original experiences. What's the driving creative document in that for your specific development process? Is it something like a GDD, game design document? Is it a script? Is it something else that's an amalgamation of just learning on the fly? Could you speak a bit to that?
Sure.
So the question is about the strategy behind the 2 to 3 hour model.
Yeah, so
Specifically creative development, not business
sure.
strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a kitchen sink answer. It's like all of the above.
Sure.
So we start out with a log line, right? A primary mission. I mean, I look at this as almost product development, right? Like, what is the user needing to experience through this? I mean, we very much take an emotional beat, and how do we, in the case of this one product we're making, it's like, how do we evoke the feeling of being a hero? And every single aspect of the game, whether the story is post-apocalyptic or kind of real world, everything has to drive towards making the player feel like a hero. So we'll use that to couch a game design document, we'll use it to drive a script and story development, but all of the, both of those things come together, and what we're finding is it's a bit of a zipper, where we'll make a game design document, then we'll write a story side of it with just the beats, no script, and start to see if those things line up naturally, and when they do, fantastic, and when they don't, it's a little bit of a battle. In most cases, we're finding interesting vehicles, like we'll do cutscene, not so much of a cutscene, but we'll take a player out of an experience and say, do a flashback in order to insert. I mean, very common film or TV storytelling tricks will employ that within the interactivity. Although each point of those, even a flashback, has to be interactive. You just can't take somebody out and put them into a movie.
Yes, Amelia.
You had said that, at least on this end, you're creating your own camera rigs. Is that by choice as a differentiator, or is that a necessary evil at this point?
So the question is why they're creating their own camera rigs.
Both is the short answer. So the slightly longer answer is every camera system is a compromise. Every production requires a slightly different compromise. If we have the ability to tweak the compromise to the production, we try to do so. So we have 3D printers and aluminum CNC milling machines running to build new mounts, and we're trying different lenses, and we're trying different sensors, and we're trying different data capture systems, because it's not just about the quality of the images. How can you deal with all the data that these things generate? The Facebook Surround 360 camera generates about 1 terabyte an hour, and that's pretty nightmarish to deal with in post. So we're trying to optimize all of it, because by the time something is turned into a product and you can buy it off the shelf, the cutting edge has moved on from there. That said, there's something really compelling about a complete ecosystem and all the sort of support you can get for something like Nokia Ozo. So I'm not trying to diss on them, but for a lot of projects, it's worthwhile pursuing some alternate options as well.
And I'd go along with that too, just attention to production. And sometimes, a GoPro Omni rig is great, and sometimes we have to roll around. It just depends on the client's vision and what they want to get out of it and how much money they have. So.
Okay, yes, in the second row. Yes.
So I have a question which is more sort of a business, an overall business question from your perspectives. So as far as the mainstream entertainment industry is concerned, not the gaming industry, what makes you think from your perspective that VR is not going to be just another blip along the road like 3D? And what would it take for it to really become mainstream in an enjoyment that is not as promotion of existing film or TV franchises.
So the question is how do you make the entertainment industry mainstream?
How do you,
I have opinions on everything, but Dario hasn't said enough.
I was asked the question actually a few times, is this going to be another 3D TV thing? And I think there's a huge difference between what 3D TV gave you as an experience that to me was more of a special effect. You know, as big as my screen was, even in an IMAX theater, I could still see the people around me. I could still see the tables, my furniture, my coffee table. In VR, you actually transport in a different place. So it's a totally different experience than what 3D TV was able to give you. In terms of mass reach, I mean, it's really going to depend at the end of the day how good the content is going to be. I come from the gaming background. I know that console sales are driven by how good the games on that specific device are. And I think it's going to be the same in virtual reality. As you know, there are so many people working up content, even way more than what 3D was, that I think you're going to see pretty quickly people getting interested in specific type of content, whether it's gaming or industrial design or movies or linear content. There's such a variety of content that's being developed for it that I think it's just a matter of time. The one thing I would say is, like, everybody's looking for this, like, how can I get this now? And I think we need to be patient. Where in VR, we're back in the days of where the Lumiere brothers were, when the first black and white movies were appearing on a screen in a public space. So we just need to wait a little bit, but I think it's going to get there. That's my take.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to ask my last question. So you're all already working in VR and AR, but if the industry is truly going to continue to develop, what is the call to action? What do you need to do as an industry to continue to evolve this area?
Well, I'm just going to add on to what you said. Content drives it all. And there's a lot of content that's being put out there just to fill holes. And I think that's really problematic because every single piece of content that we're making right now could be somebody's first VR experience. And the first VR experience is the most critical. And, you know, when I make something, it's like we're collectively